turning to you, Julianne, if I may, as a key female CEO figure in the industry, what initiatives would you choose to increase overall inclusion and diversity in leadership in the sector as a whole?
Yeah, it's a great question, isn't it? I mean, I mentioned earlier about putting some additional resource into our ESG, and I've done the same on diversity and inclusion as well, because I just felt while we've made loads of progress, and actually my appointment is a good example for my firm, then the reality is it's almost disappointing that having the first female CEO in Principality's 160-year history is what everybody's interested in. And I just feel that this, yeah.
That was a couple of headlines. I thought, oh, okay, here we go.
And it wasn't part of our press release. It's what people picked up on. Yeah, exactly. So my view is that it's almost like to focus on getting the right diversity, we need to really focus on creating the right inclusive culture. And so, more and more, I think boards need to be focused on the inclusive bit. And of course, when they're recruiting, look at the diverse bit. But my sense is, what more can we do to create a more inclusive culture that welcomes the sort of the silent voice, that welcomes the voice that maybe sometimes would be perceived as being a bit of a naysayer, that truly listens to what is being said and what is being heard and felt within the organisation. And I think that, if I think about my own experience sort of growing up in the industry, that lack of inclusivity is actually, I was in the organisations, but I didn't really feel very heard or listened to. And I think if that's what organisations could continue to focus on, all the better. I think the second thing is, are we recruiting for experience or are we hiring for potential? And I think too often in financial services, we look for ticking all of the boxes on the relevant experience. And ultimately, what organisations should be doing is really saying, what are the challenges over the next 3 to 5 years? What sort of individuals will be able to lead within that sort of area, and what potential can they bring to the table? And that's an area I think that, the world's moved on from blind shortlisting. We need to be much more focused on hiring for that potential. So that would be the second piece. And the third one then is within organisations is ultimately bringing that kind of recruitment feel into how we're thinking about talent development and succession planning. So that's got to start with from the board level and work down. But if we're not putting a disproportionate pound of investment further down the organisation and removing those blocks and listening to what the barriers are, then we'll never have that pipeline coming up through an organisation, or even indeed leaving and being able to join another organisation that may be more focused.
Yeah, and I think that's spot on. And I think that, we're sort of challenging clients as well. When they talk about their D&I, we say, well, how about your inclusion and diversity and gender, trying to just slightly change the conversation. But I think back to your point about recruiting for high potential, spot on, you kind of have what is your, there are some must-haves, but what are you prepared to be flexible on in order to get that high potential and the step up individuals for the future, so that you're looking at that in the organisation, and that to be prepared to take that on, because unfortunately, so a lot of organisations, you said, they just want the whole skills experience list ticked, but increasingly we're challenging that, and clients are starting to take a view that you are, which I think is really encouraging, and I just hope that's a trend now that gathers some pace in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, a good example when recruiting for a role recently was we did identify some talent for a role where actually on our sort of first round of interviewing, there was some minority ethnic candidates in, and they weren't necessarily quite where we needed to be to take them through. But what we've said is, well, how could we get them involved in our business? How could we support and coach them? How could we provide networking opportunities? Because actually they may be candidates for the future for our organisation. And indeed, even if they're not necessarily candidates for the future for our organisation, let's help them on their journey to be getting that next role in another organisation. So I think it's almost saying, if we don't really start to invest in talent sort of earlier, then we're never going to change. We're never going to change the outcomes, which we know are the right outcomes to achieve.
Yeah. Who are your role models in your career?
It's really interesting. So one of the most formative role models, and it's a bit twee maybe, but it's so true, was my dad. So my dad worked for a fairly major company. And then when I was 11, he decided to sort of set up a business on his own, and he sort of mortgaged the house and invested the money into this new retail business. And from the age of 11, I worked sort of, earned all my pocket money working every Saturday and through the holidays, and gaining huge amount of experience. But there was just 3 or 4 things, kind of 3 or 4 principles that as a sort of fairly small businessman, I've really taken forward into my career and still talk about them today when I talk to teams. That's sort of, when I'm talking to them about leadership and development. So my dad absolutely was a massive role model for me. I think a second one, I had a role model at Sainsbury's, a previous boss when I worked at Sainsbury's on the retail side. And he was just fantastic for bringing a little bit of theory into that sort of practicality and structure. And that massively helped me in terms of my thinking styles and how to influence people. And what I saw him do brilliantly was just that sort of take a step back, listen, apply a little bit of logic, and then go forward again. And, to have seen his career path and where he's gone to has been absolutely phenomenal. So that was definitely somebody who was massively important. And then I just look across, and again, I tend not to look just in financial services, but if I do the sort of reading of senior women who've very much sort of pushed through the glass ceiling, and I'm not going to name names, but there's 3 or 4 that I would just look at and say they showed their resilience. They brought themselves to the work. They didn't apologize for that sort of, working mum versus career woman. They were authentically themselves. And, for me, I drew an awful lot of sort of courage from that, really, that it was okay to do that it was okay to find a way that works for me. And that didn't mean to say that I had to be the very kind of high charismatic leader that, being slightly a quieter leader, being sort of grounded in not just my strengths, but also my weaknesses, that could be just as compelling to people. So there's definitely 2 or 3 women that I'd say across different sectors that really, really helped me identify the kind of leader I wanted to be, and then know my strengths, and then really go and demonstrate those, and have the courage to demonstrate those.
No, that's wonderful. And I think I love the fact that your dad and industry, that's wonderful. But I think that authentic leadership, there's been a lot of talk in the last 12 months, authentic leadership, genuinely good leaders, in my humble opinion, that's what they should be, be authentic, and don't apologize for it. But as you said, be self-aware of what your strengths are and what the development areas are, and continue to grow and develop and bring people around you that can help enhance the areas of development. And I think those self-aware leaders like yourself just stand out, to be honest. Yeah. Couple more questions, if I may.
Of course.
What advice would you give to the next generation?
Really good. Do something you love, because any job that you do, it takes up a large proportion of your time. And if you don't love it, then you're probably not going to be as effective as you want to be, and you're not going to find that enjoyment. So that would definitely be one. Have courage. So take some risks. And I don't mean risks even in terms of business decisions. I mean, obviously there's a place for that. But what I mean actually is in your career. So I did CEO questions last week with some of my sort of team, and one of the branch managers of one of our branches said to me, what do you think about squiggly careers? And I said, that's what my career's been. It's been a squiggly career. And I loved that. Apparently there's a book about it, which I haven't read, but I might well do. Squiggly careers. And, I think that's a thing, to broaden your knowledge, to learn about people, to learn about problem solving, to influencing all these things, and actually sometimes stepping out of your comfort zone, stepping into an area where you're not the subject matter expert. I think that has massively enriched my career. And so I definitely recommend that. And I think thirdly, we've touched on it, authenticity. Don't pretend to be something you're not.
Yeah, no, spot on. And And we touched on this at the beginning, and when I said about, as a leader, have you had to develop or enhance leadership and communication? And you touched on, employee well-being as being a key priority for you and the team. But how have you maintained your own wellness and resilience over the last 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, like anybody, I think it's been ups and downs, hasn't it, for all of us? And I mean, that's generally the way these things go. So I think, so I love getting out every day if I can, and getting fresh air and getting exercise. I've found that actually this Zoom world has benefited my ability to do more of that kind of stuff, because instead of having to drive somewhere, park up, be out of a meeting, I can just literally come off a call, quickly get changed, and be on a Zoom Pilates session in 10 minutes. I think I've done it literally in 5, so that's been massively important. Switching off. So one of my bad habits would be if I work too late into the evening and then my mind goes, but recognizing rest and having routine has been really, really important as well, because this blending of work and home could be challenging. And then just asking for help. So, as an example, when the children were homeschooling, I've got 2 girls, teenage girls, I touched earlier about sometimes we say to colleagues if they need to go into the office for the odd day to kind of escape. Well, I've done that as well. And I've been quite open about I'm doing this because I just need a day where I'm not having to be mum and CEO on the same day. So I think just being honest about the stress as well is helpful. It doesn't necessarily dissipate it, but it means then you can identify that support network, and it means you're consciously thinking, how can I mitigate it for myself?
I'm just hoping the schools do really stay open now.
Indeed. Yeah, it's
every day. It's like, have you done your test? Okay,
no.
Negative. Brilliant. Off you go.
It's not been easy for them, has it? But it's not been easy for
it hasn't. I really admire actually the children of this generation. Amazing. Generally, I just think, wow, that it's been awful, but I think if that's taught them resilience, one good thing out of this, and more family time and togetherness, I think generally is what a lot of other clients are saying. So I think those 2 things I think have been positives out of this. So my last question, Julianne, as lockdown restrictions are lifted, what are you most looking forward to doing?
Well, I haven't seen my parents for 9 months, so I'm very much looking forward to hopefully seeing them in May, assuming that they live in Northern Ireland, so assuming they're allowed to travel or I'm allowed to travel to see them. I think it's probably like half of the country. It's that feeling of a holiday. Like, when would it be possible to get a holiday on a deck chair in the sun, even for I'm even now at the point of, could we manage a long weekend? But obviously that may be further away than I'm hoping, being honest. And then finally, just going to the pub. I mean, I don't go to the pub that often, but I can't tell you how much I want to sit outside my local pub and have a beer or a gin and tonic, sort of sitting on a nice evening. So those are probably the 3 things.
Yes, thank you. They're very much on my wish list too. I'm like you, not a big pub person, but the thought of going to sit in a pub and have a drink, marvellous.
So
and
exciting.
maybe a meal at some point would be great.
Yeah, exactly.
So listen, thank you so much, Julianne. It's been absolutely a delight to talk to you, and just amazing to hear about your own experiences, leadership, and looking after your people, and also the priorities and innovation and progress that you are really making in the building society.